culture is so riddled with double standards from the intolerant, unloving left. Forget white privilege. To be truly advantaged and free to speak and express in this country, you don't have to be a certain color, but apparently you must be a liberal snowflake. What is this garbage? Apparently, white males are no longer allowed to say all lives matter or blue lives matter or woke because a group of snowflakes on MTV say so. Nah, I don't think so. Let me help y'all out because you clearly don't get it. And since I'm a white female, I guess your crap doesn't fully apply to me anyway, right? Here we go. When we say all lives matter, we include black lives in that category. And though not as well funded by folks like George Soros, the All Lives Matter movement has yet to burn down a CVS or block an interstate. Furthermore, if I or any white male want to say woke, you better believe we will freaking say woke. But speaking of woke, your Obama phones are about to become alarm clocks under President Trump, so get woke and get a job. But back to your idol, Beyonce. Wouldn't it be nice if she cared as much about violence in black communities as she does shaking her butt at the Super Bowl? That'll be the day. And just in case these dimwits paraded by MTV aren't aware, Donald Trump will be our 45th president. Your whiny tantrums, recounts, protests, and hashtags won't change that. He's a white male. Get over it.
About a year ago, I was at a fundraiser in Colorado, and I struck up a conversation with a major who was in command of a group of about 500 Special Forces personnel. He told me that he was no longer able to train his men in how to do their jobs and then come home afterwards, because these days his time had to be spent making sure that none of his soldiers had tattoos that might be considered offensive to women, gays, lesbian, or transgendered personnel, that he had to scour the barracks of these young warriors who were prepared to fight and die for their country in order to make sure there were no Maxim magazines or any other images of naked women that might make the home of these deadly, aggressive, disciplined men into a hostile work environment. He had to do all of this nonsense, more and more of it each year, and spend less and less time doing what he and his soldiers had signed up to do in the first place, namely, train to go out there and kill the enemies of freedom. Then one day, his commanding officer came to him with a new policy. He told this young major that he was required to poll all of the people in his command and ascertain whether they or anyone else in their household owned their own weapons, and if so, how many and of what kind. And he calmly told me that he turned to his superior officer and said, "Sir, I will not obey that order." That man is no longer in the military. Orders like the one he could not obey come down from the commander-in-chief and his hand-picked generals who are promoted based on their ability to conform to these deplorable and dishonorable policies. That commander-in-chief does not need to be embarrassed by cashiering the real warriors. All he has to do is create policies and codes so disruptive, so ridiculous, and so dishonorable that they can simply no longer abide by them.
Everything you know about Michael Brown's a lie. The media, the politicians, the race baiters, they all told you the story of an innocent young, unarmed black teen, the Gentle Giant, murdered in cold blood by a vicious white cop representing the evil establishment. But never mind. The legacy of Michael Brown, Gentle Giant, will go on. Another martyr has joined the racial testament, another fake black mark on white racist police forces everywhere. And the left's aggressive construction of the myth of St. Michael the Gentle Giant ensures that more young black men will see police as the enemy, that confrontations will escalate, and that the left will have many more future opportunities to add to their perverse canon.
I was born to hate Jews. It was part of my life. I never questioned it. I was not born in Iran or Syria. I was born in England. My parents moved there from Pakistan. Theirs was the typical immigrant story. Moved to the West in the hope of making a better life for themselves and their children. We were a devout Muslim family, but not extremist or radical in any way. We only wished the best for everyone. Everyone except the Jews. The Jews we believed were aliens living in stolen Muslim land, occupiers who were engaged in a genocide against the Palestinian people. Our hatred, therefore, was justified and righteous, and it made me and my friends vulnerable to the arguments of radical extremists. If the Jews were as evil as we had always believed, mustn't those who support them, Christians, Americans, and others in the West, be just as evil? Beginning in the 1990s, speakers and teachers at mosques and in schools began to endlessly repeat this theme. We were not Western, we were not British, we were Muslims, first and only. Our loyalty was to our religion and to our fellow Muslims. We owed nothing to the Western nations that welcomed us. As Westerners, they were our enemies. All of this had its desired effect. At least, it did on me. It changed the way that I saw the world. I began to see the suffering of Muslims, including in Britain, as the fault of Western imperialism. The West was at war with us, and the Jews controlled the West. My experience at university in Britain only enhanced my increasingly radical beliefs. Hating Israel was a badge of honor. Stage an anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian rally, and you were sure to draw a large, approving crowd. While at university, I decided the protests and propaganda against Israel were not enough. True jihad demanded violence. So I made plans to join the real fight. I would leave college and join a terrorist training camp in Pakistan. But fortunately for me, fate intervened. In a bookstore. I came across a book called The Case for Israel by Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. The Case for Israel? What case could there be? The title itself made me furious, and I began to read the pages almost as an act of defiance. How ill-informed, how stupid could this guy be to defend the indefensible? Well, he was a Jew. That had to be the answer. Still, I read. And what I read challenged all of my dogmas about Israel and the Jews. I read that it wasn't Israel that created the Palestinian refugee crisis. It was the Arab countries, the United Nations, and the corrupt Palestinian leadership. I read that Jews didn't exploit the Holocaust to create the State of Israel. The movement to create a modern Jewish state dated back to the 19th century, and ultimately to the beginnings of the Jewish people almost 4,000 years ago. And I read that Israel is not engaged in genocide against the Palestinians. On the contrary, the Palestinian population has actually doubled in just 20 years. All this did was make me angrier. I needed to prove Dershowitz wrong, to see with my own eyes how racist and oppressive Israel really was. So I bought a plane ticket. I would travel to Israel, the home of my enemy. And that's when everything changed. Everything. What I saw with my own eyes was even more challenging than what Dershowitz had written. Instead of apartheid, I saw Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisting. Instead of hate, I saw acceptance and even compassion. I saw a raucous, modern, liberal democracy, full of flaws, certainly, but fundamentally decent. I saw a country that wanted nothing more than to live in peace with its neighbors. I saw my hatred melting before my eyes. I knew right then what I had to do. Too many people on this planet are consumed with the same hatred that consumed me. They have been taught to despise the Jewish state. Many Muslims by their religion, many others by their college professors or student groups. So here is my challenge to anyone who feels this way. Do what I did. Seek out the truth for yourself. If the truth could change me, it can change anyone.
Well, you know what's interesting about Trump is the message that he has against political correctness, which has been such a cancer infecting the political left, should be a message that homosexuals are receptive to. After all, the best thing about gay culture is the dissidence, the subversion, the mischief. And when you couple that with what happened in Orlando recently and the left's total failure to stick up for gay people, and instead its insistence on pandering to radical Islam, you see quite obviously why gay people, who I think are natural libertarians, and are gravitating towards Trump. All over West Hollywood, there were these posters coming out the last couple of days, you know, shoot back, the Gadsden flag, which is this great libertarian don't tread on me icon, with the rainbow flag sort of juxtaposed behind it. I'm seeing hundreds of people emailing me and tweeting me and all the rest of it. I have a reasonably good idea of what gay people are thinking about, because I now have a sort of big enough audience that that I can judge how many people are feeling a particular way. I'm seeing a huge sea change, a really colossal and it should be very worrying to the left. A huge sea change among gays who are sort of voting grudgingly for Trump. They're saying, you know what, I don't like anything else the guy does, but he's the only one that's going to protect us. The aftermath of Orlando, as terrible as that crisis, that tragedy was, I think might be very, very culturally significant. In the last election in the UK, 50% of gay men told pollsters they were going to vote for the Tories, for our Conservative Party. I think something similar is about to happen in this election. But telling gay people that they should be in safe spaces and gun-free zones is the exact opposite of looking after them. Gun-free zones are safe spaces for killers. All of the big shooting tragedies recently in the US have happened in gun-free zones because of the places places the maniacs can go, knowing that no one's going to shoot back until armed response arrives from law enforcement. Now, what Trump said, everyone in the club should be armed. Well, I said a similar thing, when I first saw that, and even the NRA said maybe that's a little bit far. So maybe it's not a good idea to have lots of guns around where people are drinking. But here's the key point. Here's the message. Progressives are telling gays that the way to deal with this is twofold. One, to deny the connection between Islam and terrorism, to deny the connection between Islam and homophobic attacks like this. You can't do that anymore after Orlando. And two, that these expressions of peace and love from dumb celebrities are somehow going to keep people safer. They're not. What'll keep people safer is being honest with them about the risks, being honest with them about the perils to gay lifestyle in America. Being gay in America has become dangerous again, not thanks to the religious right, not thanks to cis, het, white, patriarchal, school shooters. It's become dangerous again because of Islam. And if people are not adequately educated about this, and if people are not, told the truth, they're not able to protect themselves and protect their family.
You could have a risk that it's sending the message out to more Muslims, for instance, to support these killers, etc., because you're denouncing their faith, you're denouncing who they believe Muhammad is their leader. Things like that, they go a long way, don't they, in the Muslim world?
Well, you hear this sometimes from Muslim leaders, and what it boils down to is be nice to us or we'll kill more of you. Well, I'm sorry, but that doesn't sound like sensible advice about calming down overheated rhetoric in the public square. It sounds like a threat. And frankly, I think people need to understand that the anti-gay and the anti-women problem, by the way, because I don't take any pleasure in seeing the streets of London change like they have recently with all of these people wandering around in blankets and towels. What I see is a set of beliefs profoundly antithetical to our way of life, which routinely oppresses the hundreds of millions of women who are affected by it, and which kills homosexuals. And let me be very clear about this. This is not Islamism, this is not terrorism, this is not ISIS, this is Islam. In Britain, which is not an extremist country where we're supposed to all be assimilated, 100% of Muslims, according to a Gallup poll just a few years ago, said that homosexuality was an unacceptable lifestyle choice. 52% of them want it made illegal. And for the feminists out there, I'd also like to remind you, 39% of British Muslims say that a woman should always obey her husband. What difference does my rhetoric make when 100% of Muslims already believe that homosexuality is an unacceptable lifestyle choice? That is a direct result of their belief system. Nothing I say is going to make a difference. What I want to focus on is protecting people against that threat.